Welcome back to Plutocracy Now, Episode 4. Today we're going to talk about the Middle East, Iraq, Israel, the United States, and Israeli relationship. I'm Tez Ricklin.
I'm Joey Hornbuckle.
I'm Bridgman Bolger.
And a guest for today, I'm Jason Weber.
I'm Scott Brown.
So, Israel started off as a wonderful colonial enterprise. Is that correct, Joey?
Well, it didn't start off there.
No, that's not how I would say it started off.
All right, so how did Israel start off?
Well, the history of Israel and Palestine is a long and tangled one, but a good place to start would be in the trenches of World War I. Now, it's not often remembered what World War I was, but what it was a war of the empires. You had the British, the Germans, the Austro-Hungarians, the Russians, the French, the Ottomans, and then the countries of Bulgaria, Italy, and the U.S. The Great War of the Empires is known as World War I because the empires were truly global. To give you an example, the British Empire included not only the British Isles, but Australia, Canada, India, and many other parts of the world. So while the war was worldwide, the war was mostly conducted out of London and Istanbul and Berlin. And because Paris was quickly invaded and occupied by the Germans, Italy and Bulgaria withdrew partway through the war because they said, we're tired, we want to go home. And the British Empire, the Russian Empire withdrew because their Tsar was overthrown by a communist revolution. So the constants during the war were the British Empire battling the German Empire and the Ottoman Empire. And this is important, because once the Russians pulled out, no one was left to fight the Ottoman Empire except the British. And the Ottomans had been around for a really long time. It was run by the Turks, and they controlled lots of land in the Middle East, including a small strip of land called, really at the time called Syria, but there was an even smaller part that was would become known as Palestine. So once the Russians pulled out, the Ottoman Empire, one of the longest-lasting, greatest empires of all time.
So you're saying the Ottomans controlled Jerusalem?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the Ottomans and the British went head-to-head, and they fought, and in spite of London being over 1,000 miles away, the British Empire was able to crush the Ottoman Empire. They defeated the Turks, and they basically took all the land outside of Turkey, including...
So a holy crusade of the Anglican Church, they got Jerusalem.
If you want to call it that, but there's other ways to put it. But anyway, the thing is, at this point, it became British. And once it became a part of the British Empire, that was 1920.
All right.
It was World War I. So anyway, I think the treaty may have been 1921. But anyway, once the British took it over, it was British law that was to rule this little area of Palestine, and that included British immigration policies. And while there had been some Jews that had already been living in a part of Israel, Palestine, once Palestine became open to British trade policy and British immigration policy, Jews from around the world, and especially from London, began moving to Palestine because they felt like this was a place that they could live that was close to their history, close to their origins, and there was a community being set up there of mostly Jews, and that was a pretty rock star idea for them because they were used to always being a minority and being persecuted all over the world. So anyway, later on, World War II happens. A lot of Jews get massacred in the Holocaust, and afterwards, decolonization begins to happen with the empires. And one of the places that has to be decolonized is Palestine. But a problem has come about in Palestine because the Muslims and the Jews aren't getting along there. Some groups of Muslims have created groups similar to the KKK that go after Jews within Palestine, and the Jews are upset about it and saying this is messed up or people are getting killed, and the British Empire doesn't know what to do, so London gives the whole thing to the United Nations and says, you figure it out. Eventually, the United Nations decided instead of creating one country, they would create two countries in order to reduce the conflict between the Muslims and the Jews in the area. Strategy completely backfired. Not only did the Palestinians, the original Palestinian Jews, original Palestinian Muslims not like this and begin fighting over it, but several countries around the same area also got upset and also decided that they wanted to invade Israel, at which point the United States.
And what year? Now we're up to what? Also wanted to invade Israel?
That would be, I believe, like it was around 1950,
Okay.
if I recall correctly.
Maybe 1948 when Israel, when it was declared, they declared their independence. I know they were attacked then.
There you go, 1948. So Harry Truman was president at the time, so he decided that we would help out, and Israel was given a lot of weapons, and they completely crushed everybody that tried to invade them, and actually took over a bunch of land, and a lot of things happened. But the point is that since then, Palestine continues to be a quasi-state. It doesn't have real independence. It doesn't have real negotiating power with other countries, and Israel has been trying to give them, well, that's subjective, but Israel has been trying to, at points in time, give Palestine their full independence, but every time that Palestine and Israel try to come to a deal falls apart. 1990s, Bill Clinton got the two sides extremely close to a deal, but Palestine backed off several times, and ultimately nothing ever came together.
Those Oslo Accords?
Yeah, Oslo.
Those are some of the earlier ones, but there were later ones where they came even closer.
Camp David Accords.
Yeah,
Camp
David, yeah.
All right.
You're talking about Jimmy Carter?
Was that Jimmy Carter?
Yeah,
No, I
thought
think the Camp David Accords were around like 99, 2000. Pretty sure, like right before the second Intifada.
Arafat was leader of the Palestinian Authority.
But that's fine. So
I'm-
that's Are you about done?
I'm looking that up.
Are you done with your narrative, Joey?
That was Jimmy Carter. I'm looking it up now. Camp David Accords was signed in 1978.
Oh, okay.
That was Jimmy Carter.
Okay, I apologize.
That would be Oslo
And that
Accords.
was important because that was the deal where Egypt and Israel agreed that they would not go to war anymore, and people were making a lot of jokes about it. In fact, Conan O'Brien had his first show that night, and he made a joke about it and said, "Yeah, how long will that last?"
Yeah. And I believe the Egyptian president, his name was Anwar Sadat, he got killed over that.
Yes, yes, very good.
So, the most interesting thing I find about your narrative, Joey, is that it was the
Bring it on,
Muslims.
Tez.
It was the
Bring it on.
Muslims that started kind of agitating and organizing like the KKK against the Jews.
They were very upset.
But Palestinians are composed of Palestinian Christians as well.
Yes.
Right?
There are some, yes, but mostly it's Muslims.
Okay.
So there was a lot of immigration from Europe to the area known as Palestine, whatever, because there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe, but there was also Zionism. In the late 19th century, you had the beginning of Zionism. You had the Balfour Declaration in 1917, where the British government made it official policy and said, we support the establishment of a Jewish area in the area known as Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a lot of Jews immigrating because of World War II, Holocaust, Nazis, and this idea.
Especially during World War II, it increased.
Yes. So you had tensions developing within this community because you had the Muslims that were already living there, but then you had all the Jewish people coming saying, hey, well, we kind of want to like get all our stuff together and like build a state here that's like a Jewish state. So,
but they weren't saying to build a state, they were saying to build a community and then live side by side with people who are already living there.
Well, that's not what the Balfour Declaration states, so I find it interesting you're playing this apologist role. But
the what was this called? The Balfour Declaration?
Yeah, the Balfour Declaration, 1917. So Israel, so there was the partition. So in 1947, Truman supported, our president, United States president, supported the partition plan. In 1948, Israel declared independence, and Truman supported Israeli independence. But in the 1950s, you had a dynamic relationship, a more balanced relationship between the United States and Israel, where the United States could say, we are going to withhold aid. No, Israel, we don't want you to stay in the territory you conquered in the 1956 Suez War. We will press you to withdraw because we will withhold aid from you. Or, let's see, 1953...
I have to bring something up when you mentioned the Balfour. The Balfour Declaration doesn't say anything about creating a Jewish state. It says that we want to create a Jewish community for the Jewish people, and then it even says, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. So it even mentions that not only are we not trying to create a state, but we are going to make sure that everybody has the same rights, whether you are Jewish or not Jewish.
He got his notes from the Black Panthers.
I'm literally reading the Balfour Declaration here online.
Thank you for pointing that out, Joey. I will still maintain that the people that were to become Israelis were attempting to form a state because they declared their independence in 1948. So while it may not have been the British necessarily intention, that was what the organizing was. That was the organizing in Europe, and that was the organizing that was going on in the area of Palestine.
But that organizing happened as a response of the multiple attacks that they were receiving on their friends and family members from literally well-organized hate groups. And so they said, hey, we don't want to live under the same roof as you because you keep killing our people.
That may be true, but the new historians in Israel also have a very different take on the traditional story of Israel's founding, and they say that a lot of the things that Israel did in 1948 were very aggressive, and they did a lot of bad things to Palestinians too. So there's blame to go around on both sides for being violent, and both sides do things that are wrong. However, right now in the United States stands by Israel no matter what. And that's the central point of the relationship, the special relationship that Israel and the United States have.
Taz, I want to stop you there for just a second. It's funny that you mention how Truman was interacting when the Declaration of Independence in Israel occurred. It was not a smooth transition. Actually, Israel did that first, and there was a very tense debate in Washington on whether or not to support them. Behind the scenes, at least.
Behind the scenes,
Jason
I can definitely see that happening behind the scenes, but it was an immediate recognition in 1948 of Israel. And throughout the 50s, we had this balance where we would withhold aid if they did something wrong. But what happened is, in 1956, when Eisenhower threatened to cut off assistance, the lobby, if you want to call it a lobby at that time,
the Israeli lobby.
The Israeli lobby. We cannot say Jewish lobby. And by the way, let me go ahead and get this out. So there's a little bit of a stigma sometimes in the United States to talk about the Israeli lobby, and that's the correct term because it also comprises Christians. And so there's this old crazy anti-Semitic forgery called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And whenever you start talking about Israeli lobby, you might invoke this image in people's mind that, oh my gosh, it's this, the Jews are conspiring to take over the world, because that's what this anti-Semitic forgery said.
They conspire as much as any other lobbying group.
Exactly. It is, the Israeli lobby is an interest group, just like the NRA, the pharmaceutical lobby, Cuban Americans.
Cuban Americans taking over the world,
right? Well, at least making sure Cuba has an embargo for 40 some odd years. Florida's a swing state, so you have the Cubans and you have a Jewish community there. You don't want to upset for Florida, swing state. So
that has decided the last couple of presidents.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be a major swing. Ohio was a bigger deal than Florida, but Florida is very important. So Eisenhower paid a political price at home and had to defend himself because there was a little bit of a rancor that he pressured Israel.
And this was the popular commander, 5-star general during World War II. He becomes president, and he's getting criticized for this kind of stuff. Yeah. And this was a big deal.
You know, I would think so too. And he paid a price politically. So I think what that kind of taught the executive branch is that we need to be a little bit more friendly to the Israeli lobby effectively.
It taught all the branches. It taught the legislative branch and the executive.
Well, in 1962, Kennedy was the first person to make a security assurance to Israel that we would protect them. Before that, there was no official assurance. And
This is after the second Arab-Israeli war?
actually,